worries.
Laurie.
Hi, Julie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 50. It's our 50th episode.
50.
50. I know. It sounds like a great number to me.
Catching up to my age there, Rick. What's going on with that?
What's that?
I said, you're catching up to my age there. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's soon it will surpass us all in longevity, the podcast itself somehow. Thank you for joining us, everybody who is on here. This is Recruiting EQ, episode 50, monthly success and wellness panel, S&W panel for short. And we're going to do this every month. This is the very first one. So it's episode 50. It's the first success and wellness panel, which we want to do monthly. Lots of exciting things there. So yeah, thanks for anyone who's watching. I'm going to go around in the room as usual, so we can all introduce ourselves. But before I do, let me do my little disclaimer. This is going out to a few different social media channels. So you've got LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for the first time.
Amazing.
Really catching up to 10 years ago's Instagram channel. Technology. So that's good, but that means that if you are on any of those channels, we are not physically there. So if you would like to contribute, which a lot of people do, please comment any of your questions, comments, anecdotes, and when there's a lull in the conversation, we will see them here where we are in StreamYard land and read them out. For the sake of privacy, we will not read out your name. We don't want to get anybody in trouble. You're supposed to be working or Lord knows what over lunch hour. Okay, disclaimer over. Shall we go around the room and introduce ourselves and a little bit about what we do? Pardon me, what we do, please. And let's start with Lori.
Hi, my name is Lori Schimnosky. I am an account executive at Kelly Services Canada. I work in staffing. I work with my clients in order to bring them the most talented individuals in the industry.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Jenny?
Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. Jenny, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jenny Finch. I am, alongside Julie Robinson, the co-founder of Raymond George Consultancy, based in the UK, in sunny Brighton, although it's perhaps not so sunny today. Obviously, it's 5 o'clock, just after 5 o'clock for us here. And I have worked in recruitment for just shy of 35 years, she says very quietly. So which feels, and before we actually went live today, we were just chatting about perhaps technology and what it used to be like in recruitment. So that was bringing back those memories as well. But so that's what I do.
Technology, all those years ago, we didn't have any technology, did we? It was just like paper. That was the technology. That was that was what was going on.
I actually was saying that we used to run up the road to hand deliver CVs to get them stamped on a reception of somewhere. Like, it's just crazy. But anyway, times have changed. Times are moving.
We were a lot more agile then.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's something different then to be agile. And can you run up the road fast enough?
Which actually contributed to a bit more health and wellness, right? It's actually And I was laughing with Emma the other day because it's just so funny, like how every time that I do anything, I have to talk about the weather, and you just did it as well, Jen. So I feel now compelled. I think it's a British thing. It's compelled to say that it's actually snowing still in Canada, in Toronto. It's like snowed for like at least the last 3 months. I'm sure of it. It like piles and piles of snow. Anyway, that's it.
You know, if that was in the UK, that would be on the news.
Yeah,
that would be on the news, and the whole of the country would be kind of shut down.
Well,
it'd be like, well, we can't go anywhere.
Yeah, well, we have had some warnings actually because of the immense amount of snow actually over the last couple of weeks. But anyhow, so you did my introduction, which was brilliant. Thank you very much. I look after Canada and the States, and good news on the health and wellness and mental well-being. That it's super busy. You're just going to have to get that plug in at the moment. It's super, super busy. I don't know if that's mentally great or not great. I suppose one dependent on one hand or the other, whether that's great or not great. But yes, super busy and delighted to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Laurie, for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And for anybody who's not watching this every week, I'm Rick, and I work with Raymond George as well. I'm the VP of Business Development, but it's a kind of a wear whatever hats kind of thing. Did you guys all get pushed out of the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, what happened there? Why are we in a different mode now? Weird.
There you go.
Okay.
How about that?
Is that are you doing option? Oh, I see. When you do them, it changes it for everybody. I see. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, glad to be here. We've been doing this since the end of 2022, not recruiting EQ, but this Wednesday noon kind of talks. And part of why I'm pretty excited to be back in the on this topic of success and wellness is that, funnily enough, the very first iteration of this was an audio event in 2022 at the end of the year. Sorry, in 2023 at the end of the year in fall, and it was a 5-part series on my hobbies are around psychotherapy and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I did a course on was dialectical behavior therapy, DBT therapy. It sounds terrifying, like electroshock therapy. Really not. But those skills I thought would be helpful for recruiters. And so that's how this whole thing actually started, was doing a 5-part series on 5 different skills you can use to better have a sustainable sense of wellness, well-being, and success in the workplace. And here we are now with this sort of multifaceted, the start of a whole monthly panel. So very happy that we've come kind of full circle in this whole thing. And there you go. Anybody want to chime in on before we get into our questions for today? Anybody have any burning desire to discuss wellness issues?
I was going to say, in terms of like, what's the reasoning, or why have we chosen this sort of topic and subject, Rick? What's your view on that in terms of like how? Yeah, why are we talking about this specifically in relation to sort of staffing and recruitment, would you say?
I'm glad you asked me that question.
It wasn't like a.
No, it wasn't.
Do you know what? Some of the questions though that I might get asked is like, I'm really not glad you asked me that. So it's good that you're glad on this one.
I am glad on this one because honestly, it's doing what we do as rec to recs, right? It's interesting from a recruitment perspective. It's unique in that it's peer consulting, right? We're supporting our peers, we're recruiting our peers, and we are placing our peers, and we're talking. Our clients are our peers. It's the only type of recruitment where you're actually working with your peers. So I feel like there's a different kind of relationship that comes from that, rather than working with people where you don't do the same job at all. There's a layer of separation there. So it sometimes can be a little bit like therapy, right? Like talking about the challenges and talking about reasons for change candidly for people who truly really understand each other. This kind of thing comes up a lot. So that's one reason why it makes sense, because we deal with this every day, right? In our job, it's everyone we speak to. This is kind of part of it. It's baked into the conversation. The other reason is just, again, that I think we can all agree there's been tons of change in the world, in the job market. There's still tons of change and uncertainty, particularly since the upheaval of COVID. Let's go in the past few years only, right? But since then, there's been so many ups and downs, whether it's political uncertainty, technology changes. Is AI going to replace us all? What's happening in the world? There's all kinds of uncertainty. Supply chain issues, prices are going up, jobs are disappearing. So there's all this kind of stuff, right? Which makes it just a ripe topic of conversation. And I think this is a good forum for people to share what they're struggling with and what works and what helps to either get through the day, or the whole relationship between wellness and success, which is our actual questions that we can get to at some point. But that was my thinking. How are you guys feeling about the topic of wellness before we dive into specifics? Was there any burning desire, or did you have a hot conversation with somebody lately where you're like, oh my God, this happened, kind of thing?
I think it's so intertwined in terms of the success and wellness. If you are feeling good, then potentially depends on what your definition of feeling good is, I suppose, without getting too deep. But potentially your resilience is higher, and you can deal with setbacks in a more objective, subjective way. Sometimes if you're not feeling great about yourself or your own situation, any little type of setback can really impact your wellness and your well-being. And I think it's so interlinked. And obviously when you're talking about roles and jobs and careers, when it's going well, sometimes, that, well, when it's going badly, actually, it can really directly impact you. And, you see it all the time. You see it with people. I spoke to somebody yesterday who actually just wanted a bit of a sounding board, a bit of advice about, their current situation. They weren't actively, and they aren't actively looking, but they reached out. We had a really good conversation about some ideas as to how they could tackle something in their current place of work that ultimately might make them feel better about what they're doing. And it was really, it's really simple. And sometimes, you don't spend time yourself reflecting on your own wellness. It's always measured in success, isn't it? There's a really good indicator for success, but your own wellness barometer, how do you know where you're sitting on that, apart from how do you feel?
Well, that's a great point. We were talking about this yesterday, Lori, and maybe you can, this first question too is, it maybe even starts with, how do you define success? Like, what does that mean? And what does that mean to you, Lori?
Well, I think success, I can just look back at myself, the younger version of myself. I believe I place success in a materialistic way on how much money I'm going to make, how many things I'm going to own, am I going to have a house, am I going to meet these like check boxes that we're supposed to do. And I think as I've gotten older, what I've realized is putting that success in such a materialistic way, when they don't work out, you feel more like a failure, and you start second guessing yourselves. Why haven't I bought a house by 30? Did I not get a promotion? Why am I not making what I'm supposed to be making? And you can really start getting tough on yourself and really getting in your head, or at least I can say myself, I have a lot of times in the past where I'm overthinking and worrying and stressing and living up to almost what other people define as what success should be for me.
Right.
And as I've gotten older and I've matured and I've had, some failures, because I think if we talk about success, we also have to talk about failures, because they do go hand in hand. And what failures teach us is, what is important to us, what does really matter in the end of the day. And I do think at this point in my life, I think it's more about being in alignment with my purpose. What is it that makes me happy? Can I find joy on a day-to-day basis? Are there things I can be grateful for? And so sometimes it's just stripping things back to very simple things, or they, soundingly simple. But that allows you, I think, to what Jenny was saying, is really what's important to you, and how, feeling well and finding joy and finding gratitude. And then, you can kind of move forward and feel good about what you're doing, because you're finding those little moments throughout the day. So I think instead of like this big picture, I think I've kind of shrunk it down a little bit as to what success is.
Do you think, Laurie, that because of the ability to understand what is going on in other people's lives from a career viewpoint, and what's on technology and what's available now, that almost like makes that the definition of success almost like you've got access to more information? Whereas when, I started in recruitment, the access to information was pretty much who was in your company, what were they doing? They were your competitors. That was the benchmark, not your competitors, but almost like your aims.
Right.
Whereas now the information is so readily available. So you've got that opportunity to compare more regularly if you choose to. I think there's a lot of talk on LinkedIn in terms of, compete with yourself. Don't worry about other people. Don't worry what they're doing. Don't worry what car they're driving. Don't worry what their measure of success is. Worry about your own and where you are in your life, and success is going to be different for different people. I spoke to a candidate earlier today before this call, and she has really defined what's important to her in the next role. And it's all about culture, and it's about working with good people. And that absolutely trumps everything else in terms of earning opportunity, being in an environment that she wants to turn up to work for and work in, and feeling part of that. And she said, I've really simplified it. I've reflected, I've looked at all my, the times where I've worked in great places, the times where I haven't. And when it boils down to it, the most important thing to me is adding value to a team, but working in a culture where I can be me and I enjoy it. And it's really simple.
When you were speaking, Jenny, I was thinking, the quote where comparison is the thief of joy, because you're just comparing where you are at with somebody else, and you're not really being in the moment of where you are. And I do think that social media, I know you were talking about LinkedIn specifically, but I do think social media in general, a lot of times if you're following somebody on TikTok or Instagram or whatever your platform is they're showcasing the best parts of their lives. There's very few creators who are showcasing the challenges that we face. And so, if you're looking at somebody's feed and it's all, oh, I did this and I have that and I'm traveling here and I've got this great thing, and then you're kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm not there and I'm not traveling, I'm stuck, So I think that aligning with what your values are and maybe spending some time, and I think this is a little bit about the wellness, is really finding time, whether you meditate, whether you journal, whether you walk, or whatever it is that to you that defining what are your values. And then in terms of staffing, staffing and workplace is finding a company that aligns with those values that are important to you. And I do see a push, as to what you were saying, Jenny, of more people wanting to find that fulfillment, finding that alignment, because there are opportunities. And, if you're comparing apples to apples and very similar compensation packages, I would much rather work somewhere where I feel supported, where I can be myself, where I feel it's purpose driven, where my values are aligned. And I do see that, as to what you were saying, as more candidates are looking for that. And I do think you have a better placement, a longer tenure when that does happen as well.
I think if I can interject, that probably 9 out of 10 people that I speak to talk about culture being either the most important thing or joint important thing with what they're looking for next and the right culture for them. And when I speak to clients, they always say, well, 9 times out of 10, again, they generally say, oh, we've got a fantastic culture and it's this, and we work really closely together. And, so it's almost like the same thing, just like a different brand, with respect to the folks that we speak to. And it's like, what actually makes the difference? Like, how can you really, really define that? Because, like, it was really great, and we're all like, we go down the pub, or we do whatever it is that we do. What actually does make the difference? I think that's a very hard. It's a hard question. It's also like defining that is either the maker and breaker on whether someone could be a fit or not, and also their own personal definition of what a great culture actually is.
But I think that one of the, so if you've had a number of different companies that you've worked in over a period of time, you have a good point of reference as to what does good look like and what does the culture seem to be. When you've been in a business for a long period of time and it's your only industry company that you've worked in, I think sometimes then people are unable to articulate it because they haven't got a point of reference, and they haven't got a comparator. And the companies, it doesn't actually matter, in my opinion, what your culture is. It's actually more important to understand, a good culture. Now, that might mean that we come in at 9 and we leave at 5:30, and that's the culture that we've started. It might mean that we're very heavy on the KPIs. It might mean that we're not. But actually being honest and reflective about what you can offer somebody and what it is like working there is probably the primary element, so that people then can make a decision. Actually, is that the sort of culture that I'm going to thrive in? Is it much more supportive? Am I going to be working more closely with people? Or actually, am I going to be left to it and actually kind of I need to put my hand up when I need to ask something? Sometimes too much freedom and flexibility actually isn't right for everybody, but it's about the candidate knowing what's right for them, and also the client really being truthful and honest about what it does look like on a day-to-day basis to allow the two to meet.
Well, yeah, and there's also I'd like to go back for a second. You guys all sort of mentioned like the success barometers being, to a large extent, at least at first, other people's definitions of success. And I feel like in staffing, I don't know how you guys feel about this too, but I feel like there are some people who we speak to, patterns you get to see, right? If someone comes up right away in a big company, like a larger corporate staffing agency, recruiting agency, they're given a path of success that might be, for example, when you start off, you're a recruiter, and then you move up to being in sales. Therefore, success means recruiting is a failure, right? If you stay as a recruiter forever, you never moved up, you never progressed. A progression is to go to sales, and then from sales to people management, and that's what success means. Meanwhile, you have other people who are career recruiters who make money, earn circles around people who are people managers in reality, but they don't know that. They think recruiter equals junior. So they'll say, like, I'm beyond that. I'm past recruitment. I've gotten past it in my career. But they just don't sort of know better. You know what I mean? Like, there's you get brainwashed to thinking that one path is the only, path to success. Do you guys see that too out there? Or
I think that is the, I think that, yeah, I mean, I have these conversations all the time. I mean, I massive advocate actually of that there are multiple career trajectories that are the trajectory that you want, that you're going to be more successful in, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a perceived, a layer above, which might mean a junior manager or a senior manager or a VP or whatever. So I think that hierarchical progression, which generally means managing others, isn't the right path for a lot of people. I think getting better at what you do in your trade and your skill, and becoming more senior in that, and just doing it better and earning more money and placing more people and having deeper conversations and really getting under the skin of the clients and the business problems and all those types of things is also progression. It's just a different track. But I think, to your point, yes, I think at birth we're all brainwashed and like, we've got to manage people at some point. Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. And if you don't, then that's not really like, oh, what happened to you? So it's a funny thing. Yeah.
It's when we interview people, and again, the majority say, look, I'm looking for progression. And it's actually then almost like, that's great, but what does progression actually mean? Because progression can actually be multifaceted in terms of, it could be a higher salary, it could be more earning potential, it could be managing people, it could be having the opportunity to train people, work in different locations. There's different progression, but I think people feel about progression and they link it to their own sort of like success and wellness, and if I make that, then I'm going to be, I've made it, and that's what I've done. And we were chatting earlier actually, before we came on here, that years ago, so I was a branch manager of Kelly Services years and years and years ago, and I remember absolutely thinking, I've made it. Like, I'm a branch manager, I've got a company car, at the time I had a mobile phone that was expensed. It was like, whoa, happy days. And I made a decision to go traveling. So I gave up my job at that point. There was a company pension, there was life assurance, and, I had a mortgage, so I rented my flat out and I went traveling for a year. And I remember it was a really good reset button for me, because it was a big choice. It's almost like, will I ever get back to that stage when I come back, work for this company for 7 or 8 years? And I remember when I was traveling, it stripped everything away. It didn't matter what car you drove. It didn't matter whether you had the latest, at the time it was DVD or CD. It didn't matter anything about that. What mattered was that you were healthy, that you could have, that you weren't ill, that you had enough money backpacking to have food and to have, to have somewhere to stay. And I remember coming back, and my whole attitude to stuff, in terms of, like you were saying, Laurie, in terms of possessions and things like that, to having stuff completely changed. I remember being in the moment thinking, don't get myself in 3 months' time think, oh yeah, like that's all, that's gone. But actually, it is important. I remember buying an A-Reg beige Ford Fiesta little car, and it was, I think it was 350 quid at the time. It was like, but that didn't matter to me, because actually I'd come back, and yes, I was working again, and I think it prioritizes yourself, definitely.
I was going to say, how often do we, when we're in a moment and there's we're experiencing stress for whatever reason, maybe we have some uncertainty about our finances, our job, or just, and we are living in a very uncertain time. There's a lot of instability. So, when you're in that moment, it feels a little unsure. But then when you look back and you're like, wow, that was a great time. As Jenny, you're talking about the traveling. I'm sure there was some uncertainty there. You're not sure what your future is going to be like. But when you're talking in fondness and of all the joyful memories of all the good things that you were able to accomplish. So I do think that when we get stuck in this, worry, fear, and doubt, we're taking away from the moment that we're in. So whether it's about career progression or materialistic things, there's always going to be stress and uncertainty. And I think Rick and I were talking about this yesterday about finding the strength and the stability within yourself. Because if you're looking for it externally, like, I'll be happy when I hit this job, I'll be more secure in my job when I get to a VP level. And we all know the job market, there's not a lot of stability, but you kind of put this benchmark and this goalpost. If I get here, then I'll be happy. If I accomplish this, I'll be happy. If I make this amount of money, I'll be happy. And if that doesn't work, then, did you ever feel that happiness? So if you can find that happiness and that joy within, it's going to be hard to rock that boat, because that you're happy with what you have the joy, you have your family, and ultimately you'll have your memories of all the good things that you've been able to accomplish. And I think, like I was saying earlier, is finding those micro accomplishments, those micro joys, because if we're waiting for this big thing, it may never happen. But along the way, there's going to be things that you've done that are noteworthy.
With just sort of talking with you guys, and we started this conversation last week, and what was apparent to me is that I think with hindsight and with maturity, we realise this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and it's all very well for us all to sit here, and I don't know how old you are, Laurie, it doesn't matter, but we are perhaps more grounded than and more mature than perhaps quite a lot of the target market or the people that we talk to. And I don't know whether it is something that just comes with age and experience, or whether there are, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, as a young, let's say 20 to 25-year-old, or 20, up to 30 or something like that, it's like very different stresses, and I was on a different hamster wheel. And didn't ever have these types of conversations, or even probably thoughts about, like, you just sort of get on with it. I just interested to sort of, is it different for people as you progress through life, and what and how you deal with things, or even how you even listen, or is there sort of introspection around what makes us happy, and or do most people just get on with it and just suffer through it if we're in a difficult situation or something like that? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
The one thing I said to Rick yesterday, that this is one of the benefits of getting older. I think we villainize aging, but to be honest, as I've been getting older, I know myself better. I know how I'm feeling better, before, as to what you're saying, Julie. Sometimes, like, there's all these things swirling on, and can I identify what I'm actually feeling? And now that I'm, a little bit more mature, and I've gone through certain things, am I feeling anxious? Am I scared? Am I, and to really try to identify those feelings, and that as practice. And I don't think that there's any right answer to that. I do think that life is about learning, and you're never gonna, like, as I tell my children, you're never gonna get from A to Z without going along the way. So there is some wisdom, and I do think as we do mature and as we get older, it's almost part of our purpose is to give back and share. And whether that's through having children and sharing with them, or in staffing, I do feel it's very much like coaching and mentoring or consulting, where you are being able to listen and hear and give feedback. And ultimately, people are going to have to go through those experiences themselves, no matter how much you try to guide and help. But I do think that sometimes, learning these things is going through challenges and going through failures. Like I was saying before, knowing what success is maybe coming from not succeeding sometimes.
Yeah. I also think that we are in a society today, and certainly over the last X amount of years, where people are more comfortable genuinely sharing how they are feeling, talking about mental health, talking about, there's not this expectation that everyone's like, oh, everything's fabulous, because actually it isn't all fabulous. And particularly, during COVID, lots of people struggled, and I think that, and even before that, I think that we are now in a much better society that accepts that it's not all roses all the time, and it doesn't make you a bad person if this moment or this day or this hour you are not feeling on top form, and it's okay to say that. And I think that's one of the differences. Years ago, anybody that might mention, feeling a little bit, oh, it's not, I'm feeling a bit anxious, or I'm not feeling absolutely positive about everything, it was almost like brushed under the carpet, wrongly so. But now there is a platform and there's the opportunity. And I think that even with friends or with colleagues, you notice, and people are prepared to have that conversation, say, how are you? No, how are you really?
Yeah.
And actually giving that forum to talk about it.
Yeah.
There's something interesting that both Jenny, you said this, and Laurie, something that you said as well, which I think combined, I'm just interested in expanding on with you guys as well, which is sort of like the stability, right? Like having this stability, and it comes up all the time in terms of reason for change, right? It's a very unstable time. I hear it all the time. I need to get something that's more stable. And I think we've all, because we have a sort of a bird's eye view and we get to see what's happening out there, we have a different idea of what's stable than somebody who's in their job. And Jenny, you mentioned this earlier too, is that, if you're only in the one job, like you don't really have as good of a sense of what good looks like, right? And it feels like stability right now, in order to judge that, it's almost like people need to be informed, more informed about what's happening around them than ever. I think that before, you could just sort of be a boat adrift in the job market, and the job market would take care of you to an extent, right? You did a good job, you'd move up, maybe your company closes down, but you can go work for a competitor. It seems like there was a more simple trajectory for people. Now it feels like you need to inform yourself as to what is out there, what are the options, and what's really going on, in order to know what stability even looks like.
I think you're right, Rick. I think that so I was speaking to somebody last week, and they have probably worked for 3 or 4 different businesses. All of those 3 or 4 businesses, they've never really applied to go there, because they've either known someone that's left their current business that's gone there, so they've been brought along, and they actually haven't necessarily had exposure to the market when you are looking for a role. What they've got is they've had, and I would say Julie and I probably fit into that category. If you know somebody and you know someone in the market, sometimes you move with you move to the next firm because someone else has joined them as well, so you're a known quantity. And I think it's very different when you don't know people in the next business, when you're looking at interviewing or you're researching the market, and you're an unknown quantity. And I think so stability in some ways, I think, is, if you are moving jobs, but you're moving because someone knows you and they know what you're capable of, and perhaps this crosses over a little bit of imposter syndrome as well, but when you're in the market and you're starting afresh, it's like, well, you are one of many, and you haven't got that
yeah,
in the next business. So your impression and your first impression counts, and what your CV looks like, and why you've changed, and what your numbers and everything like that. It's very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laurie, you had mentioned too about the looking within versus looking without.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that plays in interestingly, like just hearing the different things you guys are enumerating. It's funny that I think a lot of people maybe look within and look without at kind of the wrong time. And I know I was guilty of that for sure. It's like we're taught when we're kids to look within, to know like what you want to be when you grow up, But like, is that really the way to do it? Should you be looking within and being like, I need to be the CEO of a major corporation, I need to be a people manager or whatever, decide that, and then go out without really knowing the reality, but then looking outwardly to make you happy and satisfied, right? It should kind of be the opposite. Like, try to look within to find, your emotional regulation, your joys, your whatever else, and look without to be like, well, what's out there? Let me try things. You know what I mean? It's sort of a.
But do you think? And it would be a wonderful place if it was like this. I think that it's hard to go and try things, to give it a go. And I think that's the hard thing, isn't it? Because almost like you give it a go for 3 months, oh, I didn't really like that. You give it a go for another, somewhere else. And very quickly, you're being asked, what did you learn from that experience? What, if you'd had your time again, should you have chosen them, that business to work for? Or should you, so you're almost like expected to know more about what you are looking for every time you move, so that you can almost like narrow it down to an absolute finite, well, I know what's the best place for me, and it is XYZ. I think it's hard for people to, and yes, if you do contracting, if you do temp work, and particularly for people that are getting their first or second roles, they don't know. You don't know. You only know what you know until you've done it. You then don't know, and then you learn, don't you?
And I do think that it's never too late to try over. Like I do think, because I have a child who's 18 and trying to steer him in the right direction, it's, you just kind of have to take a step, because you're never really going to know. The person who I thought I was at 18 and where I started in terms of my education and where I am right now, I don't think I could have had a crystal ball and projected I would be in staffing. It did kind of happen along the way. And I do think it is that those check-in points, is this making me fulfilled? And what about this role do I like? Because, I have had different roles, and there's certain things I've liked about that, but I didn't like that. Like, I've always liked sales and I'm a people person, but there's different sales roles I haven't necessarily liked as much as this one in terms of staffing. So you can like certain aspects. And I do think maybe what Rick is saying is, looking within, okay, I'm not happy here. I'm looking for something else. Okay, well, do I hate everything about this job or this career, or what do I like? And identifying, okay, well, I'm a people person. I like to be in front of people. I'm really good at working with Excel, and, and then maybe even sometimes working with a recruiter and trying to help identify what's out there in the market, because there are ebbs and flows. Yeah. A few years ago, you couldn't find anybody in talent acquisition. And now, it's tough sometimes for people in talent acquisition to find positions, because the market has shifted so much in the last few years. So what skill sets do I have from this role that maybe I can apply to a different role and be successful?
And I think the other thing that often is good to do is to be reflective in terms of, what would I like to do more of in my next role, and what would I like to do less of? Right. And I think that gives you almost like a bit of clarity in terms of, that almost then refines what you're looking for. This element, I'd love to do more of that. This element, I'd like to do less of it. So by natural sort of evaluation, that's quite a good question to ask yourself, and be really honest with yourself as well. Right. I think that's the other thing, because sometimes you can be told that you're good at something, but you might not enjoy it. Because if people look at, oh, you're brilliant at doing this, and it's like,
I hate it.
Yeah, but I don't really like it, and you're crazy, aren't you? That's amazing. And I think sometimes it is really like we've been saying, it's look inside yourself, look inside, be reflective, think about your intrinsic motivators rather than the extrinsic sort of like motivators as well, and be honest. You can't change everything. I think there will always be duties in anyone's role that they are less favourable than more favourable, and that's part and parcel of working. But if you can get the balance of doing more of the stuff that you like rather than less of it, then you're in a great place.
Mm-hmm. Laurie, what do you do? Because I've seen your sort of posts on LinkedIn and stuff. I think that you're a runner. Are you a runner and a meditator? Is that what you do to sort of like relieve stress?
I don't run.
Don't run. Okay.
I'm not a runner.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, I'm not that there's anything wrong with that. I've never really been a runner. I did start taking up like long distance biking a couple of years ago. And one thing I would say I felt like I've always struggled with is endurance sports. I'm more somebody who likes to lift weights. It's short, intense, but like it's done. So actually doing the biking has been more of a challenge to me, because it's like pushing myself past my comfort zone a little bit. So in terms of me feeling successful in that is, okay, I got to 30 kilometers, and last year I did the Bike for Brain Health, and that was 50-kilometer bike ride. And that was the furthest I've ever biked. And, that was successful to me. That was a success for me. I felt really good about that. But it was a challenge for sure. So I do think also with success comes sometimes with challenging yourself and pushing yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit, because I do feel we all have that comfort zone. And maybe even what Jenny was saying is like, okay, well, somebody says I'm good at that, but I don't really like it. So what do you like? And can you push yourself to do more of that, and incorporate that into your day? And, Rick and I were talking a little bit about, yesterday about purpose and what makes you happy. And, can you weave purpose into your work? And sometimes, I do feel, I was thinking about this yesterday when I was going for a walk, that, some people, and maybe this isn't true, but somehow I feel like some people are born knowing what they want to do. Like, I want to be a doctor, and I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and they accomplish it, and they do it, and they're great, and they feel happy. I've never been like that. I've always kind of struggled to find what makes me really happy. And maybe it was going here and then going over here and then going here. But I do feel as I've kind of gone through life and maybe pushing myself and challenging myself and trying new things, I think I'm getting closer and closer to that. And I do think that that's that's most people's path, is kind of trying and failing and doing an introspection and keep trying and failing until you find what you like. And same thing with the biking thing. I don't think I ever really would have been like, oh, I do want to bike, but my partner bikes and I saw him doing these and I said, I want to try. And I tried, and it was hard. And definitely there's been times where I felt like, oh, why am I even trying this? But, it feels good when you kind of can push yourself. And to that too, yes, I do meditate. I try to do it every single day. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But I do think that helps with that stability and that kind of internal compass. And with so much craziness going on, having those few minutes of just inner peace is really helpful to not be so in so much fear about uncertainty, and so much like, when you hear the news, sometimes it's not great and you're like, and I think having that meditation or that alone time, whether it's walking or journaling or whatever it is that you do, kind of helps you be able to not be so reactive to those external situations that we don't have any control over. Mostly everything in the news we don't have any control over. So that's the one thing also since COVID, I would say, has been a great addition to my daily routine.
Good for you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that. And you raise a good point, Lori, too, about there is a lot of pressure, I think, that we all feel, whether it's social media or otherwise, to be successful in a career and monetary way. But there's lots of other stuff that one can do, like you pointed out, challenging yourself, even raising money for a cause, doing other stuff that doesn't tie into that monetary and consumerist sort of capitalist success. That is unbelievably gratifying. That should also be considered success as well. And It's almost like there's a stigma, not a stigma exactly, but you know what I mean? It feels like you're discouraged from, not you, but many of us are discouraged from doing that stuff. It's like, go, make as much money as possible, and everything else, you're kind of a sucker in a way. I feel like there's that narrative, which I think keeps people, unsatisfied.
Stuck in the hamster wheel, just kind of.
It's the draw to the hamster wheel. I think that's what it is. I mean, I have to say that I did the Terry Fox run a couple of years ago, and I mentioned it just because for me it was like, I am not an endurance. I can't run at all. I'm not an endurance person from a sport perspective. It's like, a bit like my daily life. It's like, okay, let's do things as fast as I possibly can, short, and then move on to the next. And when I did complete this, I didn't even know how long 10K was going to be, really. I did it, and it was afterwards partly because I did it, but also because it was for something else. It made me feel, and a cause which is dear to my heart. It was incredibly gratifying, and sort of took you out of the rat race and took you off the hamster wheel for that moment and for that weekend, or and even now when I reflect on it, it feels very cool. but it's just doing something for other people helps sort of diffuse the tension and the build-up of sort of daily life, I think.
Agreed. A couple of comments I'll just point out as they are coming in. We have one gentleman here who said, "Hi everyone, love the meeting so far. Lori, I'm exploring new projects. Would love any tips or recommendations. If you can check out my profile and suggest something." I don't know if we should check out his profile now or whatever, but thank you for commenting. And yeah.
I think I also think that I mean that sometimes, and I've been trying to do this more often, is actually being sort of in the moment and just thinking, do you know what? This has been, you know, this is okay. This is okay in the moment. And actually almost like, you know, sounds like, doesn't sound like me in terms of doing it, but I remember, you know, sort of actually sitting there and thinking, do you know what? It's okay. You know, whatever it is, or wherever you are, whatever event you're in, actually, you know, not just getting through it as fast as possible, but almost like taking a picture in your mind about life is good, you know, and actually appreciating life sometimes, and kind of stopping and pausing for a very short period of time, and you know, being grateful for things that in maybe years, you know, years ago, it, like Julie says, it's on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, and you forget that, you know, life is a journey without getting too deep, but you sometimes have to stop and think, I'm in this part of my journey and actually it's all right. You know, and I don't know, I don't do meditation, you know, maybe, you know, it's something that I'll look at, but, you know, almost like the mindfulness sort of like play of being mindful about what I'm doing right now and what factors are around me and how do I feel.
I actually, Rick and I had mentioned that yesterday, of just being like the power of now and being present in this exact moment. And, you know, sometimes, like, you know, I've got young kids and sometimes it can be chaotic, but sometimes I sit at the table and like, we're all here together. We're all surrounded at the table. And I know with young children, you know, there's a few years where they're going to be flying the nest and they won't be all within under my roof and kind of all together. So I think sometimes the day-to-day moments can be so, you know, so much stress. And I think we take on so much more, you know, especially as women, maybe than we have in any other past time in history, where we're, you know, managing the home and children and also our careers and everything like that. So we can forget to be grateful and in the moment. And I do think, Jenny, that's a great practice. And even sometimes when I'm out for a walk and like, oh, the trees look really nice, or that's a really nice breeze, and just, or the birds are chirping, and that's just about, like stripping all that away. And if we can just focus on some of these small things and like lower our stress level, because I do think we are in a very go society. I do think, as great as technology is, it's kind of helped us kind of stay tapped in and tuned on all the time. And it's nice to maybe put your phone away and go for a walk and not really, you know, don't worry about emails and phone calls and what's going to happen, and just focus on where you are right in this moment and enjoy that. And it actually is harder than it sounds. You know, it sounds easy, but actually it's not.
It isn't. It's true. And this also ties into, Lori, what you and I were talking about this the other day as well, yesterday, how it kind of feels like there's this binary narrative between, like, you know, you work and then you have vacation, right? You have your work time and your rest time. Your work time isn't supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to enjoy it, right? It's toil in a way. Your reward for it is money. You're not supposed to enjoy that. You're supposed to enjoy your downtime, your vacation, or whatever. But then there's all this pressure, of course, to enjoy your vacation. Enjoy yourself on your vacation, because then, or in your time off. And I feel like that leads to people jealously guarding their time off in almost an isolating way. And do you want to expand on that a little bit? We were talking about this the other day, about the whole like separating things, as opposed to finding joy, finding that moment of mindfulness during your day, you know, to sort of appreciate where you're at.
Sorry, was that question pointed at me or everybody?
Well, at you, Lori. I think because I remember we got into a very long conversation about exactly that. But and whatever, if you wanted to expand on that anyway, we can.
Yeah, I do feel like it's we get very little time off. I mean, I think even very generous vacation packages, when we look at our year to year, majority is work and less is vacation. And I do think a lot of people take their work on vacation with them, or answer their phone calls after work, and or emails, or feeling this pressure. Again, I think it's this pressure to succeed and pressure to do well, or to move up the ladder, where we have a hard time really disconnecting. And even on vacation, we may not be able to really fully relax and enjoy. I was fortunate enough to just go away a few days ago, and I didn't take my work phone with me, and it was kind of like should I, shouldn't I? And I was like, it's a short vacation, and it was really good to disconnect, to be honest. And there were a couple of things that came up, but nothing that nobody else could handle. But I've been definitely guilty in the past of taking my work phone or my work laptop with me, and just feeling like I still need to be on and connected. And, I don't think I did myself any favors because I felt, I went away a couple of years ago, and I took my phone with me, and I was with my girlfriend, and we were out enjoying the day. And I was like, oh, let me just check my emails. And it wasn't a good news. And I just feel like I could feel myself getting drained by that. I could feel myself getting sucked back in, and feeling like, and also there's not much I could do about it because I was on vacation. And I really did a disservice to myself, even though I felt at the time I should be connected. So I do think that we need to really prioritize that self-care, even if it's in the evenings and on the weekends, of just being present with it, whether it's with your family or something that you enjoy, whether, again, it's running, biking, shopping, or doing things that make you happy outside of work, or picking up a hobby. I know we talked about that a little bit yesterday, Rick, of, maybe you like knitting, maybe you like playing an instrument, maybe you like, and it doesn't have to be your career per se, but it can give you that purpose and that meaning, and something that you can look forward to and be proud of. As to what Julie was saying about the Terry Fox run, it gave you that kind of fulfillment that sometimes it's hard to find at work. And there are some people who can mesh them both, and certainly you can feel fulfillment at work. But I think at the same time, when it's your livelihood and you're making sure you need to bring home the paycheck, sometimes it can be hard to find that meaning within the work as well, because those, we have to make money, and we have to pay our bills, and so sometimes we can separate those two. So finding something that brings you that joy outside of work, I think, is really important.
I think, though, that there's this almost like this in society today, that there is this expectation that you are available because of technology.
Yeah.
So, and if you don't answer something within a period of time, then it's like, or you don't, respond to a text or something like that. And without sounding old again, but years ago, you didn't take your phone on holiday. You just had a holiday. And, you didn't take your laptop on holiday. You actually had a break. And this Christmas, actually, I wrote a post about it recently. I didn't take my laptop away for a 10-day holiday. Yes, I had my phone. Yes, I could check my emails. And yes, if something really bad happened, I could, deal with it. But actually, it was quite liberating. But it was a conscious choice that, after however many years, 15 years or so, my laptop wasn't with me. And it was actually quite freeing, mentally. I had my phone, and that was okay. But I do remember years ago, you just there was no expectation. You had a vacation, a holiday, and that's where you were, and people dealt with it. It was okay. No one died when you were away on holiday of something happening. And if you've got colleagues and people around you, then it's good to have that practice in terms of an internal culture that you don't do it.
I think there's another benefit of doing it, and not that I don't necessarily practice what I'm preaching here, but thinking about it, because I may well go away shortly, is that by not being available and not being there 100% of the time, others grow. So others in the team grow and are faced with stuff that they wouldn't necessarily have to deal with, let's just say. So others have to grow, and others have to be responsible and figure it out. So that's actually a good news story, I think, for everyone on the team.
For sure.
And I don't know if this was applicable to, if anyone remembers, but there was a time when I grew up that there was like, on Sunday, things were closed in Canada. Like you couldn't grocery shop, and like there were certain things open, like maybe, you know, the pharmacies and like, but you know, and I remember distinctly when they introduced Sunday shopping, and it was, but now I think it's almost like maybe that wasn't a good thing, because, you know, it forced us to kind of be more like with your family and take time and not be so busy doing things. So not only did it take away from maybe, okay, now I'll do my grocery shopping Sunday because the grocery stores are open, but then there's also people that have to work in those stores, so then they don't get to be at home with their family as well. So I do think, to both what Jenny and Julie are saying, is just this being available all the time makes it harder actually to disengage. And I'm curious, Jenny, when you decided to leave your laptop at home, did you have like maybe the first 2 days where you felt like, or was it automatically like, oh, it's okay?
Do you know what I felt genuinely is I wasn't, so when you fly, I'm always worried about where my laptop is in terms of, the anxiousness of, is it in the bag? Okay, let's check that. It hasn't been thrown, you know, fallen down from the lockers in the air, you know, in the airplane. It's gone through security. Okay. You've locked your hotel room and you put it in the safe if it fits in the safe, or you've hidden it in a lock. So the security element actually was so, I kept sort of like almost like thinking, where is it? But yeah, the first few days, but I think there was probably a benefit of doing it over Christmas, because actually there are more people off over that period of time as well.
Right.
I would like to think in the summer I might do it again, but I think the Christmas period felt more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, to start with, but then I kept thinking to myself, you know, I've got a phone. If someone really needs to get hold of me, I've got a phone. They can, and my emails are on my phone. But what I didn't do was constantly sort of check everything. And you know, and I remember also years ago when I used to go skiing, although skiing was a much more physical holiday, I always came back more refreshed from going skiing, because you don't have your phone on you. You're not checking it around the pool. If you're around on a holiday, you know, a more traditional holiday where you're, you know, round a pool, or you're, you know, in a hotel, you've got your phone, you've got access to it. But skiing, you physically got to get it out and look at it. And that actually was a really good, like, you know, memory of thinking I did used to feel refreshed afterwards, because you're not checking it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. Before we end off, because I know we're just conscious of time here, I want to throw the last sort of question that I had in mind of discussing this. Is we all seem very aligned that wellness and success kind of go hand in hand, and taking that self-care is the right thing to do, and unplugging every once in a while is the thing to do. But it definitely feels out there that there are people who do not feel that way, right? That there's a stigma against bringing up wellness, bringing up mental health, bringing up, you know, any of these kinds of things, rest and whatever, and unplugging, that it's somehow counter being ambitious, that it's somehow being lazy, that it's somehow being abusive of the system so that you can get away with not doing work. Like, that's the big goal. How do you guys feel about that? Is that just an older mentality? Is there some truth to that? Or is the system being abused by people just in the name of wellness to just scam and get paid for doing nothing? Like, how do you all feel about that? Is it just people being negative for no reason?
I'll just say, you know, there's always going to be people who take advantage, for sure. I don't think you can ever discount that for sure people may take advantage of their time and stuff. But, you know, I always say, like, if I'm not recharging myself, I have less of myself to give, you know. So there's only so much you can draw from yourself. And if that means I need to go take a 15-minute walk or a 30-minute walk because I'm feeling frazzled, but I do feel, at least for myself, that helps clear my energy, clear my thought process. And I do a lot of my thinking when I'm out for a walk, because I'm not being distracted by phone calls, emails, stresses, and then I can come back and solve that problem a lot better. If somebody sees that as lazy, I think that person's open to their own point of view. But I personally feel that I'm being more productive because I'm coming back, and I usually can be a little bit more creative and tackle that problem a lot clearer.
Yeah, and Julie, you and I spoke about this last week too, I think, which ties in, which is the there's a difference between self-care and recharging and avoiding the things you're supposed to do or avoiding the things you're scared of, which is even more stressful sometimes when you're avoiding the thing, right? Because they pile up and then suddenly they're all.
Yeah. Just to Laurie's point there, I mean, I always, I don't miss, I mean, sometimes I go out for a walk just in terms of how I deal with things, but sometimes I'll do that. But I think for me is I have to have quiet time, whatever it is, if it's walking or something. And I often say to the team, don't I, in the morning, it's like, okay, so just before I go to bed, or while I'm in bed and just before I go to sleep, I almost have like this, okay, so what are we doing now? It's almost like a distilling of what's happened and what we need to do. And that's almost like my planning moment. So that's sort of like half an hour between sort of getting into bed and then falling asleep. It's like, this is my quiet time without the child, the dog, the family members, the this, the that, the whatnot, the team, the clients, the candidates, whoever it is that I give portions of myself to all day. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is my quiet time to try and decompose and next. Didn't really answer your question, Rick, but
no, but that's good.
I think I think a lot of this is knowing yourself and how you manage your own feelings and your own levels of tolerance, stress, what you need to do to make sure that you're on the right sort of plane. Because as Laurie says, if you're not, then you have nothing to give others. So you have to look after yourself first. And if you're in a good spot, then you can share.
Yeah, and you will be more effective.
I think in some businesses, the leaders that also do that and that their staff can actually see them taking time for themselves to recharge, whether it's popping out, whether it's, and is actually saying, I'm going for a walk now, I'm going to get some fresh air, I need to do that it's leading by example. So it gives permission to other people. I think sometimes in businesses, particularly if you're on site, and that isn't, what's coming from your manager or the leaders of the business, it can make people feel a little bit guilty, like, well, actually, do you know what? I really need to go out now. That's what I need. But sometimes people aren't able to do that because they're not giving themselves permission, because they're not seeing other people doing it. So when we talk about culture of businesses, if that is coming from everybody in the organization, it's like it's the norm. It becomes the norm and it becomes accepted, rather than, oh, that person keeps going out and needing to go and do that, and I think that's probably quite key, that other people are giving you permission to do that, not giving you physical permission, but because they're leading from example, and therefore you think, oh, that's the norm.
I will say this before we end, but I worked at a company for 7 years, and for 7 years I ate at my desk, and I never did the walking thing, and I never stepped away from my desk. And I think, to Julie's point, is like knowing yourself and knowing what you need, and feeling like I needed to eat from my desk to prove something, to prove that I was available, to prove that I could, that I was indispensable. But in the end of the day, I do think in most workplaces, you are dispensable in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't matter how many emails you take after work, and if you work through vacation and work at your desk, if things change in the, in the economy or in the workforce, you're just basically
doing nothing.
Service. Yeah.
It could count for nothing, can't it? That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. Well, I thank you all for being here. Laurie, thanks for being our first featured guest.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, and I hope you all join, those who are listening, join us every Wednesday here. And Laurie, hope to have you back again.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.